listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Happy Wednesday evening, folks. This is Scotty Roberts. It's Hump Day. You're listening to my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. Come on over, see all the goodness that's Odyssey Radio, and check out all the places where you can find this show in its audio format. Places like iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, all of those places. At the same time, you can come over to my YouTube channel. Boy, I just rattle this off by rote, don't I? I've got it almost memorized. The only time I glitch on these opening announcements is when I'm just not thinking straight. Or I'm tired, or I'm drunk, or whatever. But you can also come over to my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Check out the live chat room going on right now and watch the video simulcast of this show. And at the same time, if you're not already, subscribe over there on my YouTube channel. And you can scroll back and you can find every single episode we have done on Odyssey Radio, plus 50 or more other episodes prior to being on Odyssey Radio, plus all my live broadcasts, plus, if you want to see it, my family stuff, my paranormal investigations, my travels to Egypt and things like that. There's all kinds of stuff over on my YouTube channel. So go over and subscribe, hit the little bell so you get notifications, and take a look at what's there and enjoy yourself. And that's all I got with that right up front. Also, as you know, I'm an illustrator and a designer, and I want you to go check out my personal website. That's ScottAllenRoberts.com. If you're watching the video, you can see it right down below in the scroll bar. It'll be spelled out there. There it is, right there, ScottAllenRoberts.com. And you can see all the kinds of work I do: illustration, design, logo design, corporate development, identity, and book design, all of those kinds of things. That's what I do. That's my bread and butter. Come on over, take a look, and if you need that kind of work, give me a shout. And let's move into today's show. Last night was a little unique. We did some poetry last night. Sometimes, now, I'm not a big, let's call it this, I'm not a big fluffy guy that needs, I've got to recluse into my poetry because the world is heavy today. I don't do that normally. Sometimes I pick up my guitar and I play. Sometimes I write poetry. Sometimes I read other poets. And it's not always a ritual to me. It's on occasion. I'll pick up a book and say, wow, I love this poem. And so that's what I shared with you last night. Just a little bit of the mental relief that I get out of poetry. And many times, as I said about Yeats last night, I think he has written about just about every human emotion that exists. And we didn't cover them all, of course, last night. But you can see what he writes, how that affects me even on a personal or a passionate level. And so he writes the way I wish I could write. And so I hope you enjoyed that last night. If you didn't get a chance to see that, you can go back and see the archive of this show over on my YouTube channel and check it out. And by the way, the live chat room that is playing right now, if you're listening to the show or if you're watching it, you can see the live chat room. And that live chat room is something that replays with every one of the archived broadcasts. The only time it delays is when we do a live stream, and it might take 24 hours for the live chat to show up. But you can go see what everybody was thinking, too, and saying. Now, you can't contribute to the live chat room once we're archived, but you still can comment down below the video, as you can at any time. And by the way, I appreciate all the suggestions that come in, either by email or personal message or in the comment section below the video. And Steve had a great contribution last night, so we ought to look into the pyramid builders. And so you know what? I think we're going to do that. But not starting tonight. Tonight, as I started kind of looking into the pyramid builders, I got a little sidetracked by ancient Israel. And the reason I did is it's talking about not only the influence that Egypt played in ancient Israel, or even ancient Canaan, the region where Israel is now. They would call it, in modern terminology, they'd say it was Palestinian, but it wasn't Palestinian before, several decades ago. And so the Canaanite region, and I started looking into the gods of the ancient Canaanites and how that perhaps Israel was doing like we have seen with Christianity. When Christianity moved into Great Britain, what is now Great Britain, when it moved into Europe, it kept running into these pagan enclaves. And so rather than war with them, which they started out doing, trying to suppress them and force them to believe, they adapted their religions and they merged things. And we've talked about that in the past. Well, Israel kind of did the same thing. And so as I was looking at all this, I was noticing all the religious aspects of ancient Israel that were adapted. And so you have this. Now, you all do know when I say the name Yahweh, or the word Yahweh, Wahweh, that is an ancient form of the word Jehovah. And this is supposed to also be that private name of God. And Yahweh, there's a pagan Yawehism in Israel. And it's kind of the folk religion of ancient Israel. And imagine it this way. The Bible imagines, not to use that word twice in one sentence, imagines the religion of the ancient Israel as purely monotheistic. We're presented with Yahweh, Jehovah, a God that is a singular God, a monotheistic God. No other gods before him. No other gods by some interpretations of that. Even though we looked at a few weeks back how that the first commandment, when it says, thou shalt have no other gods before me, that was indicating bilinguistics. It was stating these other gods from these other countries, these other religions, you shall not put them before me, for I am your God. I am Israel's God. And so you have to look at how Israel perhaps merged the ancient paganism of Yahwehism into what we know as Judaism today, or even ancient worship of Yahweh and Jehovah. And so there were Israelites, particularly those associated with the Jerusalem temple, who were very strict monotheists. But the archaeological evidence, and the Bible too, if you read it closely enough, suggests that the monotheism of many Israelites was far from pure. And for them, Yahweh, the name of the Israelite God, was not the only divinity. And some Israelites believed that Yahweh had a female consort. And many Israelites invoked the divinity with the help of images, particularly figurines. And you can call this Israelite religion pagan Yawehism. And you remember in the commandments, it said to have no other God, and that there should be no graven images made, or sculpted images, or any kind of image that was supposed to represent who God was. Yet we saw that all the time. And in the Old Testament, you saw the prophets would tell the kings, you need to go tear down the groves, tear down the pagan groves, tear down think of Celtic religion, the Druidism in ancient times, and they worshipped in the groves, the oak groves, the ash groves. And many times when the Romans came in and defeated the ancient Celts, they would burn down the groves. And Christianity would come in and would burn down the groves. And the same thing in Israel. God many times commanded, take down the groves, burn them down, and hack down the Asherah poles that were the representations of the goddess Asherah. And so the archaeological evidence, we're going to look at some of that in tonight's show, comes mostly from Judah, in what is known in archaeological terms as the Assyrian period. That's the span from about the early 700s BCE, when the Assyrians destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel until about the mid to late 500s, 586 thereabouts BCE, when the Babylonians conquered Jerusalem and destroyed the temple and brought an end to the Davidic dynasty in Judah. That Davidic dynasty, of course, being the dynasty of King David. And so this period, to put it into perspective, is several centuries after King Solomon built the temple in Jerusalem, around 950 BCE. So the archaeological evidence that we're about to discuss tonight documents this level of Israelite paganism long after Solomon built an exclusive temple home for the center of cultic worship of Jehovah, of Yahweh, in Jerusalem. So while Yahweh was the God of the Israelites, other nations had their own national gods. And the chief god of the Phoenicians was Baal, or Baal, if you want to pronounce it that way, with the hyphen in between, B-A-L. For the Philistines, the chief god was Dagon, and later also Baal. And for the Ammonites, it was Milcom. And for the Moabites, Chemosh. For the Edomites, Kos, Q-O-S. For the Israelites and the Judahites, it was Yahweh. Now, except for the Edomite god Kos, who appears only in archaeological record, all of these gods are mentioned in the Bible. And you can find them in 1 Kings 11:5, 7, and 33. So go look those up if you want to see those references to all of those gods. Now, let me take a sip of coffee. Swallow much? Pardon me. Maybe I shouldn't have taken a sip of coffee. So interestingly, while each one of these nations that we just mentioned, their chief gods had a distinctive name, his consort, the chief female deity, had the same name in every single one of these cultures. Asherah, or its variations, Ashtoreth, Astarte. And as we'll see, this was even true of Yahweh's consort in the Judaistic religion of Judah, the Israelite religion. So not only was the female consort the same in all these different religions and all these various cultures, the different nations all used the same cult objects, the same types of incense altars made of stone and clay, the same bronze and clay censers, the cult stands and the incense burners, the same chalices and goblets with the same bronze and ivory rods adorned with pomegranates. And it was easy to take cult vessels of one deity and place them in the service of another one. And this was what was commonly done in the ancient world in the Middle East. And for example, in the 9th century BCE, stele erected by Misha, the king of Moab, describes himself as the son of Chemosh and tells how he defeated the Israelites. You can see that same defeat mentioned in 2 Kings 3, 4 through 27 in the Old Testament. He then brags, "I took the vessels of Yahweh and I hauled them before the face of Chemosh." Now, we sometimes, when we studied all of this stuff, now maybe this doesn't occur to you in day-to-day life because it's not something you sit and study or look after or research to try to find out, delve the depths of these things, despite being interested in it when it's presented. We sometimes get the impression that after Solomon built the temple in Jerusalem, that Yahweh had no other sanctuary in ancient Israel, but this just isn't the case. The religious reforms of first King Hezekiah in the late 8th century BCE, and almost 100 years after Solomon. You'll find him in 2 Kings 18 and 2 Chronicles 29 through 31. And then the King Josiah in the late 7th century BCE sought to centralize the worship of Yahweh in Jerusalem. And so the need for these reforms demonstrates, however, that Yahweh worship was by no means confined to Jerusalem. even though during David's reign he sought to establish Jerusalem as the center of the cult worship of Jehovah. But it wasn't the only place where this was done. The Bible itself mentions sanctuaries at cities such as Dan, Shechem, Shiloh, Bethel, and Beersheba. And archaeology confirms that there were numerous other sanctuaries outside of Jerusalem dedicated to the Israelites' national god, Jehovah, or Yahweh. And a cultic installation dedicated to Yahweh must have existed at Judahite Nebo in Moab during the 9th century BCE. In his stela, Misha claims to have taken from Nebo the vessels of Yahweh that he later used in a sanctuary dedicated to the Moabite god Chemosh. So there were vessels of worship being used at Nebo. And this would have been in the 9th century BCE, around the same time that Solomon built the temple in Jerusalem. Now, this complete Judaite sanctuary has been uncovered in the fortress of Arad in southern Judah. And despite these scholarly disputes as to precisely when it was built, when it was destroyed, it's clear that Arad, the sanctuary there, was in service simultaneously with the Jerusalem temple and was probably in use during most of the monarchy. And so it consisted of 3 parts. There was a courtyard, a hichal, or a main hall, and a debur, or a holy of holies, which was ascended by 3 steps. In the debur, or the holy of holies, was a masabah, or a standing stone. Think of Stonehenge, or the smaller standing stones you'll see scattered all over, say, like the Orkney Islands in Scotland and the north of Scotland. And there was a standing stone in the Holy of Holies. And 2 additional masabah, or masaboth, were embedded in the wall of the Holy of Holies. On the 3rd step, 2 limestone incense altars were found, with remains of burnt material on top, probably incense. And in the temple courtyard stood a large animal altar. Other cult centers have been uncovered in Israelite Megiddo and Judahite Lachish, and both are dating to the 10th century BCE. So before the temple was established. And there's actually, when we talked about the Dome of the Rock, remember this? We talked about the Dome of the Rock and what's known as the temple platform on which it was built, and how the Wailing Wall, which is down on the back side, I think it's kind of the south, if I get my, it'd be the southwestern wall, or the western wall. The southwestern wall of the temple compound where sits the Dome of the Rock today, that wall, that whole compound was the temple compound. But when we were talking about this, there were those who said maybe that wasn't, because we found down south in the city of David, which is just the southern extension of the city, the original town, the temple compound would have been built north of the town, and that they found temple remains in there, what looked like temple remains. That this is more than probably one of these other temples that was built there, in that region. This was a Jebusite stronghold before David conquered it. So, cult installations have been excavated in several Israelite and Judahite fortresses. There was one at Vered Jericho. It was reported a long time ago that took place. I don't have my date written down here. The excavator, Evi Eitan, interpreted the installation as a bamah, B-A-M-A-H, or a high place. Now, the Bible you will see all the time, and I thought, when I was a kid, I used to hear this when we'd talk about this stuff in classes, how and Jehovah God, and God said to the prophet, "You shall go to the high place and tear down the Asherah poles and burn the groves at the high place." And the high place seemed like these were these bama, or these places of high worship. And Itzhak Beit Area reported on cult platforms ascended by steps founded adjacent to the gates of two fortresses near Arad, Uzzah and Radum. And in addition, a large four-horned altar and a bama were excavated at Beersheba. And stone stairs to the fortress of the Maze, the M-E-S, the Mace or the Ad Mikmash on Judah's northern border have been interpreted as leading up to a bama. And although it's not been found, there was doubtless a sanctuary to Yahweh at Lachish, the most important city in Judah after Jerusalem. And we know of the Lachish sanctuary from reliefs depicting a pair of large cultic stands taken as booty from Lachish. Every time I say booty, I wanna go, "Arr, booty, arr, avast, where's me booty? Avast, booty." Oh, booty. Now, see, that can be a noun. It can be a pronoun. You could say, yeah, we raided the Spanish Main and we brought home our booty. And you could say, yes, I'm a married man. I've got a permanent booty at home. So, anyway, the booty from Lachish by Sennacherib's soldiers, there are these large cultic stands taken as booty from Lachish. And they're in these inscriptions. And after they had sacked the city in the late 8th century, this would be 100 years after the building of the temple in Jerusalem, these well-known reliefs were excavated long ago at Sennacherib's palace in Nineveh. That's all the way back up into the Euphrates River Valley. And the Judahite cultic stands depicted in the reliefs are very similar to numerous smaller examples that are frequently found in contemporaneous level sites at Judah. And so inscriptions also confirm the existence of cultic installations dedicated to Yahweh, some even outside the country. And at the cult site of Kuntilit or Ajrud in the Sinai, inscriptions were found that mention Yahweh of Samaria and his Asherah, his consort, his goddess, and Yahweh of Teman and his Asherah, consort, goddess. And so a house of Yahweh is also mentioned in numerous inscriptions in the ancient world in the Middle East. When one of the Arad ostraca, on ostraca, remember, it's a piece of pottery. It's a pottery shard that's used, and they've used ink and written messages on them. Sometimes shopping lists, sometimes spells, sometimes letters, things like that. And in one of the Arad ostraca, it's said of someone that he is in the house of Yahweh, is what it says. And you can find these texts. You can look them up, but I don't think there's any reason to go through all that here. It's just technical information. So an ostracon from the collection of Shlomo Musaeff records a contribution of 3 shekels to the house of Yahweh. And so these were all over the place. Now, we got to go out to break, and so I want you to sit tight. When we come back, we're going to pick this up right where we left off. folks. Welcome back from that break. This is Scotty Roberts. Welcome to the second segment of tonight's show. This is the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. Come on over, see all the goodness. It's Odyssey Radio. At the same time, you come on over to my YouTube channel, see the live simulcast in video, and join the live chat room going on right now, where they're talking about this stuff, they're talking about other stuff. Everything gets talked about over there. So come on over and join and subscribe and enjoy yourself. Now, in talking about this stuff we're talking about, I think it's fascinating. Historical study and historical research is a fascinating thing, especially to me. It's one of my favorite pastimes. It was my avocation for a while. It was my chosen major in school. It's something I studied in seminary, and it's something I've studied all throughout. And you can see most of my own books are based on historical things, taking a look at them from either a biblical history or something like that. And mentioning biblical, that word, this shows you also what we're talking about tonight, the value of biblical history. Because do you think it's important, if you are in the faith, let's say you are a Christian and you are in the Christian faith, do you find that it's important to know your history? Do you accept everything just as a matter of faith? Or is it okay to have faith bolstered by your history? I have always said, and I said a long time back, remember when I mentioned back in 1993 we did those biblical trading cards for kids? I said history is an amazing thing. Back then, I said it's like opening a door and shedding light into a dark room that you know is the history room. It's there. We know it exists. But if you could shine the light into it and see all the little nooks and crannies, you start to understand what life was like back then. So we read these biblical texts. We even read biblical history when we read those stories in the Bible. And many times we have no idea. Did you know, as you grew up Christian, that Israel had gods, more than one god that they worshipped? Did you realize that worship of Jehovah was a consolidation of other gods? Did you realize that when God in the first of the 10 Commandments said, "You shall have no other god before me," was speaking literally? There are other gods and you shall not worship them. You shall worship me only. I am the God of your fathers, the God of Jacob, Isaac, Joseph. And so I think it's very interesting when we start looking at these things from an historical point of view, that we start seeing what life was really like back then, what was really going on in the religions. And we kind of left off with talking about how the house of Yahweh or Jehovah was something that was found on several ostracons, pieces of ostraca, pottery shards that had inventories and spells and histories written on them. And there was an ostraca from, we left off saying, from the collection of Shlomo Musaev, who records a contribution of 3 shekels to the house of Yahweh. Now, do we care? Is it a great significance? That? Not necessarily, other than to establish that there was a house of Yahweh that was there in that part of the country that was not the temple in Jerusalem. And so all this major point was that we were going through at the end of the last segment was establishing that there were houses of Yahweh, houses of worship all over Israel that weren't the temple. So, and then you have the ivory pomegranate. I don't have a picture of that up, but it was, think of a pomegranate. It's kind of looks like a little heart-shaped piece of fruit, a pomegranate. And it shows that there were spikes coming out of the top, which I think represents the leaves of the pomegranate. And there were these ivory pomegranates. They even found one on the temple site in Jerusalem. But they found these all over the country. And there was on the inscribed ivory pomegranate, there's a Hebrew writing on that. And by the way, that was made famous when it was purchased by the Israel Museum. And the inscription says that it's sacred to the priest of the house of Yahweh. And it's generally supposed that the 3 shekel ostracon and the pomegranate refer to Solomon's temple, the house of Yahweh in Jerusalem. But that's not necessarily so. In light of the many sanctuaries that are dedicated to Yahweh outside Jerusalem, the references to the house of Yahweh on the 3 shekel ostracon and on the inscribed ivory pomegranate may well refer to a sanctuary other than the Jerusalem temple. A house of Yahweh could have been located in any settlement in Judah or in the area settled by the Judahites. And these houses of Yahweh weren't called the temple. The temple was a very specific thing. There's an old song when I was in a musical and I've talked about this before, where the 2 characters during the life of Jesus, and we performed this musical at our church, and one of them was supposed to be Joseph of Arimathea, and he was talking about how he was raised, and he was raised in temple worship, and he became a Pharisee and part of the Sanhedrin in first century Judea. And in this song he says, "There must be nothing greater than the temple, nothing firmer than God's law." And this is what they believed. And by the way, that duet, I'll have to perform that. Kevin Olson, my friend, who comes into the chat room every now and then, I believe he played Joseph of Arimathea in the play. I was going to play, and then I think he took it over because I moved away, and I didn't do the play, if I remember right. But he and I have sung that duet before. He and I will probably put that together for. It's almost got a Les Miserables quality about it, because you've got this duet that's going on, and of the believer, the almost believer, and then the believer in Judaic law, and they're in 2 different places, but they're singing this song and it blends together. So anyway, I'm rabbit trailing on that song, but this is what it was like, these houses of Yahweh. And the temple, there must be nothing greater than the temple, was the way the Jews believed. So if this ostracon, and if these pomegranate, ivory pomegranate, they were like headpieces of staffs that were used in religious practice. If those were from the temple in Jerusalem, the inscriptions would mention the temple. Instead, it talks about the house of Yahweh, in which there were several of those scattered across Israel and Judah. That's the only point I was making with that, by the way. Several seals contain names designated with little Cohen, just like the name, Cohen, Cohen, or priest. One recently published seal refers to Hanan, son of Hilkiah. Hilkiyahu. Just like, think of Netanyahu of Israel, the prime minister of Israel today. Yahu being that common suffix. And so it's Hilkiyahu, the priest. And the ending, Yahu, is a form of Yahweh. And another seal dating to the last days in the northern kingdom in Israel, the late 8th century BCE, mentions an Israelite priest active in the temple at Dor. Shekharyo. Yo is a shortened form of Yahweh, the priest of Dor. And so similarly, the prophet Amos reports the Amaziah. Yah is another form of Yahweh. The priest of Bethel sent a message to King Jeroboam of Israel in Amos 7, verse 10. And that was Amaziah, or Amaziah. And Yah is a form of Yahweh. And a seal inscribed with the name Miknayahu, still another Yahwistic twist on the name. That was a servant of Yahweh. Indicates that the owner served in one of the many sanctuaries dedicated to Yahweh. And obviously, servant here means not a person without status, but rather a high functionary in service to the divinity. Not quite a priest, but almost. So the Yawehistic names just mentioned incorporate the name of the Israelite God, Yahweh. In Judah, names had Yahu as a suffix, not Yahoo, but Yahu, W-A-Y-A-H-U, Netanyahu, servant of Jehovah, and or of Yahweh, you could say. And so in Judah, names that had Yahu as a suffix. In Israel, it tended to be simply Yah or Hyo. And the theophoric element could also appear at the beginning of a name, such as in Yonatan or Jonathan. Jonathan is Yahweh, is at the beginning of that. Jonathan, Yohathan. Evidence of Yahweh worship comes from the prevalence of Yawehistic names. Approximately 1,200 personal names have turned up in archaeological excavations in Judah, and on seals or bullae, lumps of clay impressed by a seal, and ostraca. Over 45% of them contain a Yawehistic element. And although a more general name for God is El, Israel, and Nathaniel, think of the archangels. They all have the name of God in them, Elohim, which was another form of God's name. Instead of Yahweh, Elohim, you had Michael or Michael. You had Gabriel. You had Ahithophel. You had, what were some of the other ones? Gabriel, Michael. You get the idea. And although a more general name for God was El, only 3% of the 1,200 names contain this theophoric element. Other gods were incorporated into Judahite names even less frequently. And the prevalence of Yahweh worship is also reflected in the frequency with which his name is invoked. For instance, in the ostraca found at such Judahite sites as Arad and Lachish, which we mentioned in the first half, his name appears in numerous oaths and blessings. I have blessed you to Yahweh. May Yahweh let hear, my Lord, tidings of peace. May Yahweh bless you in peace. May Yahweh give my Lord pleasant tidings. May Yahweh give you prosperous things. And the like. And all this reflects the widespread devotion to Yahweh among Judahite population. Yet, was it a pure worship of Yahweh? Or did elements of the population mix their Yawehism with paganism? Now that's the question that we started out asking at the beginning of the first segment of this show tonight. And let's see if we can get into that. I've already mentioned the inscriptions from the Israelite sanctuary at Kuntilit Aruj in the Sinai. Kuntilit Aruj. Ajrud. It's Kuntilit Ajrud in the Sinai. And that dates to the late 9th or the early 8th century, just shortly after the building of Solomon's temple. And that refers to Yahweh and his Asherah. Now, this site, of course, is outside the borders of Judah. It's in, technically, Egypt. It's in the Sinai. But a reference to the divine couple, Yahweh and Asherah, has also been found at the site of Kerbet el-Kom, in the heart of Judah, near Hebron. A tomb inscription there reads this. It says, "Blessed will be Ariyahu to Yahweh and his Asherah." Now, like their neighbors, Israelites and Judahites widely used figurines to represent aspects of divinity. But it's rather surprising that so many figurines, peculiar only to Judah, are found within the borders of the supposedly monotheistic, but not to say imageless, kingdom. So remember, they weren't to have any graven images. And there's an interesting episode that you don't find it in the Bible, but there is a rebellion that was put down by none other than Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, during the lifetime of Jesus, the famous Pontius Pilate, who condemns him or signs the writ of execution for Jesus. And there was a scene a few years earlier where he suppressed a rebellion that took place in the temple compound. And this rebellion happened because he had brought in shields. Pilate had brought in shields to adorn the walls around the inner court of the temple with the image of Tiberius Caesar on them. And the Jews went apeshit because this was a graven image of the Caesar. And so they staged a little rebellion. Some people were killed. Pilate was trying to subdue it peacefully, yet some people were killed and it was put down. The Shield Rebellion, it's referred to. You can look that up. Look up Pontius Pilate and the Shield Rebellion. And so the Israelites and the Judahites widely used figurines to represent their divinities, which was not supposed to be done according to the first of the 10 Commandments. So like the figurines in the surrounding cultures, the Judahite examples are mostly female, about 5 to 6 inches tall, these little figurines, and they belong to the type known as pillar figurines. The head is made separately from a mold, and the body is usually slid and handmade in the shape of a small column, to which are added exaggerated boobs, supported by the statuette's hands. So it's like, you know. And scholars usually identify these figurines as Astarte, the fertility goddess. It's curious. I have a picture of Rainey. Those of you who've seen the UFO shirt that she had me make for her, the Hop In Loser shirt, I took a picture of her. And if you go over to my Etsy page right now, if you scroll through the items on the page there, you will see a shirt that shows a picture of Rainey modeling the shirt. If you click on that and look at some of the other images that are in there, I've got the image where she's holding her breasts up and holding them out and going, wow, yeah, this is my shirt. Buy it. Well, that is a perfect image of what these little Asherah statuettes looked like. So perhaps I have in that photo of Rainey, I've got a perfect Asherah figurine. And so, the fertility goddess. Another common variation involves a handmade head with a kind of a pinched face, and these are often called bird's head figurines. And sometimes the goddess is playing a tambourine or holding a dove, a traditional emblem of goddesses in all periods throughout the ancient Near East. And a few figurines were made in the Phoenician tradition. Phoenicia, over on the coast of Israel, have a hollow, round body, a bell-shaped body, in scholarly jargon. Even rarer, but occasionally found, are figurines in the form of a plaque, flat on the back and impressed from a mold on the front. And that's so they could hang them on a wall. And so the Judahite figurines were originally painted in strong colors such as white, think of bold white, red, black, but the paint survived only on a few of these, and eye and hair were made especially prominent, and occasionally a necklace was added, just in paint. And so another surprising fact is, although these figurines have been found all over Judah and Israel, about 405 out of 822 to be exact, were found in Jerusalem, and many only a short distance from the Temple Mount. So what are these? If you're not supposed to... The 10 Commandments came along before they built the temple. If you're not supposed to have these graven images of any kind, why are so many found? Over 400 of them found right in the Temple of Jerusalem district, dating back to those times. What about male figurines? In this respect, too, Judah didn't differ from its neighbors. There were male figurines, though not as many as there were for the female figurines. So they more worship. Was it because they worshiped the body? You look at an artist, most of your artists, let's really modernize this for a second. Come all the way up to your modern comic book artists like Marvel and DC and some of these other comic book companies out there. Look at the female superheroes. Huge boobs with costumes that accentuate every little tight crack and crevice. And we say, well, those are comics definitely drawn by a guy. It's not that women don't draw them that way, but guys do this. So could it be that the woman figure was more worshipped than the male figure? Could it be that they held Asherah as the consort of Yahweh, of Jehovah, held her higher in esteem? And they come in two types, these male figures, riding on horses and wearing a round turban, sometimes with a raised hand. And so the first type is by far the most common, riding a horse. Some scholars connect these figurines with the cult of the sun chariots mentioned in the Bible. Go to 2 Kings 23:11 and you'll see that. 23:11, he removed from the entrance to the Lord's temple the statues of horses that the kings of Judah had placed there in honor of the sun god. How about that? They were kept near the room of Nathan Melech, the eunuch. And so there you go. That's 2 Kings 23:11. And according to others, they represent a warrior god. And the latter seems more likely. A warrior god appears in the cults of all of Judah's neighbors, and Yahweh himself is pictured as a warrior in the Bible. For example, in Isaiah 13:4, where it says, "The Lord of hosts is mustering a host for war." And so the turban crown figurines seem to be wearing an authentic turban. The turbans are very similar to those depicted over on the Israelites going into exile on the reliefs at Sennacherib's palace at Nineveh. These male figurines could represent some foreign deities, perhaps the Phoenician god Baal, who was worshipped in Judah alongside Yahweh. Or they may represent Yahweh himself, who would be joined by his consort Astarte, or Asherah, the female figurines. And in either case, there can be no question but that these figurines are Judahite. They're from Judah. And we're thus led to the inevitable conclusion this is really the soul of biblical archaeology right here. It leads you to the conclusion that between the foreign pagan practices and the pure monotheism of Yawehism, there existed a cult that may be called Pagan Yawehism, or perhaps more accurately, Yaweistic paganism. It's like, remember when I asked the question, does Christian paganism or pagan Christianity exist? Can it exist? I asked that question months and months ago when we talked about that topic for quite a while. And it's the same kind of thing. Can you be a Christian and be a pagan at the same time? Can you incorporate the two? And this is the same thing we have here. Did Yahwehism or Judaism incorporate some of its own pagan ancient roots? And of course, in the background was the central monotheistic cult practiced in Jerusalem temple by its priests and preached by the biblical prophets. And some of the kings of Judah, especially Hezekiah and Josiah, made efforts to centralize the monotheistic cult in Jerusalem. But looking at the archaeological evidence, we have to conclude that they were less than 100% successful, because you've got all these artifacts from all over the region, all over the country of Israel and Judah. So indeed, until the Babylonian destruction of Judah and the end of the Israelite monarchy in 586 BCE, when Babylon conquered Israel, tore down the temple, carried off its treasures, and deported its people to Babylon to assimilate them. That pagan Yawehism was common even in Jerusalem, to say nothing of the rest of Judah. Now, we have almost no evidence of cultic practices of any kind from the period between the Babylonian destruction and the return of the exiles under Cyrus, the king of Persia, Cyrus, Artaxerxes. the king of Persia, in the late 6th century BCE. Remember? He finally said to all the Israelites, okay, you can go home now. And that's when they all went back home. Remember we've talked about many times, made reference to the 72 rabbis who went to the Library of Alexandria to reconstruct the Hebrew histories and scriptures there by going to the library and finding all the old texts. And this was in the late 6th century BCE and in the early 500s BCE. And so the situation changes in the Persian period with the return of the exiles. Once again, figurines are found during this time period in the area that was Judah. But now the area was divided amongst the Idumeans, the descendants of the Edomites. Remember who was one of the most famous Idumeans mentioned in the Bible? It was Herod Antipas, the Idumean. And the Judeans are the Jews, the descendants of the Judites. And so Galilee was inhabited mostly by the Phoenicians. And in the post-exilic period, the figurines were found only in areas inhabited by Idumeans and Phoenicians. In the areas of the country occupied by Jews, not a single cultic figurine has ever been found, despite intensive excavations and archaeological surveys of these areas. So the situation is much the same with respect to post-exilic sanctuaries. Many have been found in these non-Jewish areas, but none in Jewish areas. And so the only exemptions are the Second Temple in Jerusalem and the Samaritan Temple on their holy mountain, Mount Gerizim in Samaria, just north of Jerusalem. And the Samaritan Temple on their holy mountain. These figurines are found. So upon the return from exile, the Jews purified their worship, and Jewish monotheism was at last consolidated. And this is, to me, this is very interesting stuff, because you will have periods of time. You have that period of time from where there was the destruction of the temple by Babylon and the carrying off of Israelites to Babylon, till the time they are returned home, that there's none of this that dates to that period, till they're all back. And so, once again, biblical archaeology is a very interesting thing. And when you think about the monotheism of Old Testament religion, Judaism, the folk religion of ancient Israel, the paganism, the country religions, if you will, were incorporated into Judaism. And when you find the Puritans in the Old Testament constantly fighting against the Baal worship, the Asherah worship, the groves, the high places, these were all places of pagan worship that the Jewish hierarchy kept trying to wipe out to have a pure Jehovah worship. Mostly you're going to find all through ancient history in Israel a mixing of paganism and Judaism. So there you go. I think that was a fun little romp for today. We got to get out of here. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Going to take a 23-hour break, and we will be back. So you sit tight. Have a good night.